If you are somebody who is afraid of wasting materials and you can't really enjoy perfumery because of it, watch this video and I hope it helps you because I will talk about my experience and how I overcame this myself recently. I assume that for most people, this fear is rooted in the finances area of their life because, let's be honest, perfumery is not a cheap hobby. It costs money to get equipment, it costs money to get all the materials you need. And despite what other perfumers say online, I don't believe you can start with just 20 unless you want all your creations to smell essentially the same. But also the fact that the materials run out, just like paint for a painter. These are things that are not one-time purchases, you will have to buy them again and again. But the worry is not really about running out of material, the worry is about running out of material and having to spend money again to get it. And if you're already in a financially tight situation, you may not want to do that. But this has one problem, and the problem is that in perfumery, you have to use the materials. Because if you don't use them, it's like having paint as a painter and not using the paint, or buying brushes and not using the brushes because you're afraid they're gonna get used and you'll have to get new ones. This can be compared to a painter just using their fingers instead of the brush because they're afraid of using the brush. But in perfumery, you can't really use your fingers unless you go squeeze a lemon and use that as lemon oil or something. The point is that this fear, I believe, is rooted in finances. But even so, even if you have a tight budget, did you buy the materials to hoard or to collect them? Or did you buy them to enjoy perfumery? This is the question I was asking myself because I have around 100 materials and I still felt this fear that, first of all, I don't have enough, but second of all, they're all 10 ml bottles. I'm gonna run out of them so quickly and I'll have to get new ones again. And it's not cheap, you know? But then I thought, I'm not buying them to collect scents. I'm buying them because I want to make perfumes and I want to learn and get better at perfumery. So what is the point if in me having all these materials, even if they're full bottles, if I'm not doing the thing that I bought them for? And I had to accept that this is just part of the craft. Just like for an artist and a painter, they need to buy paint when it runs out. Or for somebody who enjoys cooking, they have to buy the ingredients. And for them it's even worse because they spoil rather quickly. In perfumery, the materials are usually fine except certain kinds that have a lifespan of around 2 years. But still, this is something we have to accept if we want to enjoy perfumery. In a way, it can be compared to life as well. Is it better to live a long and empty life or a short one but truly lived? Compared to perfumery, it can be like, is it better to have 1,000 materials that you never use or 5 that you are truly intimate and familiar with and you know what they're like, you can create amazing things from these 5 materials? I would say the answer is rather obvious, that the 5 materials you use are way better and enjoyed than the 100 or the thousands that you never touch. The thing that really helped me was to embrace experimentation and to understand that you are never wasting material if you learn from it. Treat every drop like investment in your taste and your education as a perfumer. Let's talk about some practical tips. The first one ties into my last point, is that you should probably mix with intent to learn something or to try something, not randomly. Although you could counter argument this and say that you can enjoy by simply putting random things together and that can be experimentation, and I agree. But I'm simply saying that if you mix with intent to learn something, for example, to understand what this specific material smells like in a specific context, then you're not wasting this material, you're gaining knowledge, you're paying for this information using the drops of the materials. That's the first tip. The second tip is don't blend raw materials, which you probably already know. Dilute to 10% or 1% for stronger materials, not just to save the material, but also so that you can evaluate better and it doesn't blind your nose. The next tip is to minimize your formulas using linear scaling. And by this I mean you will often find formulas online that are 5 grams, 10 grams, 20 grams. Most often it's not necessary to make such big of a batch. You can scale it down. Not always, because sometimes these formulas have really small ingredients at such small scales that if you scale the formula down, you will simply not be able to add the material. But even in this case, some materials you can skip for the sake of experimentation. If this is a formula you have never created and you have no idea what it could smell like, well, you could skip the small materials and still have some kind of result and learning experience from this, even if the formula is not 100% accurate. The next practical tip you can follow is to play around with accords and not the whole perfumes. I know it can be tempting, because I'm definitely tempted to make whole perfume formulas that you find online, but it can be just as rewarding to create an accord of an apple, for example. And this is not going to be 20 materials unless you're trying to recreate most realistic apple accord. It can be something like 5 materials. So if you want to learn and play around with perfumery, you can simply do accords. And this is not worse than creating perfumes, because you're still learning how materials interact with each other. You're learning how to recreate different kinds of smells like apples and woods and other things. So you're still learning, and you will be able to apply this knowledge when you want to recreate a whole perfume, because you understand. Let's say you see a formula and you see 3 materials that you recognize because you did an apple accord previously. So you're like, oh, I know this is an apple accord within this formula, most likely. And it builds your ability to read the formula and kind of see what it might smell like. Not to mention that it's easier and quicker to create accords than entire perfumes. Just takes less time and effort. Final practical tip is that some materials have a shelf life. So even if you don't use them, they will spoil, and now you can't even use them, even if you wanted to. That's true for many citruses and sometimes aldehydes. You need to research this yourself, which materials of yours have this fate. The fact is that if you are afraid of using them, well, they will spoil. Not all materials, I'm not scaring you, but some materials like bergamot, they have a shelf life. So if you don't use it up in 2 years, you can't use it anymore. For me, this fear went away quickly when I realized that my materials have been in my shelf for about a year already, so I have 1 year left for some of them. And when I truly embraced the experimental and fleeting nature of perfumery, that's when I was like, I want to enjoy this. Even if I have to buy the materials again, I want to enjoy this. So I'm not going to let this fear stop me from learning and enjoying perfumery. Because remember, you can always buy more of the things you like or need often, but using them and learning from the experiments is what will give you the clarity as to what materials you need and which ones you don't even care about.